Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
John, how are you doing?
Sam, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. I hope you are as well.
I am.
Well, great. Now, Sam, I've got to ask you a question. I mean, here I am. I'm significantly older than you are by some, not quite 3 decades, but close to it. As a result, I remember far more sort of transitions from one presidential administration to the next. However, I've got to tell you, even in my long life, I'm as old as Methuselah. I think it was 990 years or something like that, according to Genesis. I've been around for a very long time. I don't remember a presidential administration transition as wacky as this one has been. It seems as though every day we're getting some sort of jaw-dropping sort of activity from the White House or from the ex-president-elect or even from handpicked or their handpicked favorites. I mean, Musk chief among them. Sam, I got to ask you, if I'm feeling this way, that this is kind of weird stuff, what must someone of your age be feeling?
I think everyone has an opinion on it, is going to be my answer, and I'm sticking to it. Some like certain parts of it more than others. I guess it depends what side of the aisle you're on, but to me it begs the question, how much of this is the people in the administrations that are outgoing and incoming versus just the trend of the way things have gone over the last couple decades and the influence and the executive orders and things like that, and it's probably a little bit of both.
Well, you're probably right about that, but even so, I mean, some of the stuff that we have seen come across the tapes over the last several weeks has been really, in my estimation, head scratching. So we'll talk obviously a little bit about politics here today. We'll talk about religion next week just to make sure that we alienate everyone. But Sam, I know that you are familiar with the president, current president Joe Biden, delivering or giving or awarding the U.S. Medal of Freedom out to a number of noted Americans this past week, including Bono and Lionel Messi.
Magic Johnson.
Yeah, well, that's just my point there is, giving out the Medal of Freedom to people who aren't American.
Yeah.
Lionel Messi didn't even bother showing up for the award ceremony. I think he realized how ridiculous that was. He's from Argentina, and Bono is an Irishman. I mean, so it's kind of one of those deals. And then on top of that, some of the things that the current president has done is draining, just pretty much prohibiting new drilling of oil off of the Gulf of Mexico, which, by the way, President Trump or ex-president-elect Trump has said he's going to change the name to Gulf of America. Then we have all the various pardons that the current president have done. I mean, literally, I don't know, hundreds of pardons.
Yeah, I think it's the most since the Vietnam War skippers were.
Yeah. And then also even the discussion about preemptive pardons of guys like Fauci and Elizabeth Cheney, which would suggest there's some semblance of culpability there. So I don't even know how that got out there. And then there's threats from the administration doing some more. But and then I look on the other side of the aisle. Here we have the president talking about, we're going to use armed force to take back over the Panama Canal. We're going to take over Greenland. I'll stop with those two and say, Sam, what are you thinking? A young man of your generation thinking about some guy talking about, we're going to storm the Panama Canal and we're going to take over Greenland. How important are those things to you and people that you know?
Well, not as probably important as people that were maybe a few years older than my generation, to put it nicely.
Okay.
Because the Panama Canal, for people in my generation, it's just it's been a thing the whole
it's
time.
A ditch.
Yeah, it's just like part. But, when you dig into the details of that, and that's not the point of this conversation, there is some justification for wanting a little more control over the Panama Canal and the importance it plays for the U.S. and what have you, and the way we handled really passing it back off to
the Panamanians.
The Panamanians. So, but the point is, to me, an interesting thing is how it seems like the administration has already changed since the election, or really, especially the last 2 or 3 weeks. I couldn't tell you where Biden is or what he's doing most of the time, and we're seeing things from Trump basically every day. So that seems to be a little more unique versus the last couple times around.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. You said that you didn't know where the president was and what he's doing.
I don't think. Do you not think he does either? Is that what you're?
That's what I was kind of laughing about. But now we can at least acknowledge that the man has slipped a little bit over the last 4 years. You know, take a look at that. Take a look at the Panama Canal, and Sam, I am old enough to remember when Jimmy Carter signed that legislation or whatever it was in order to turn the control of the canal over to the Panamanians, and that was highly contentious at the time. Very highly contentious, and people were not happy with that. It was not publicly popular whatsoever. It turned it over, I guess, 1999 or something like that. It was signed in the 70s and turned it over. Since that time, you know, we can debate whether or not the Panama Canal is as important as it once was. But even so, it is a major thoroughfare in terms of the shipment of goods across the oceans of the world. And when you take a look at it, I'm thinking about it, and I've got a pretty good friend that was born in the canal zone. You know, I get what Trump is trying to say on that. I mean, I get it. We do want to be in control of that. I mean, after all, America largely built it.
Lost lives for it.
Lost lives, yeah, and all that type of stuff. I get it, but I'm just kind of wondering, is that the battle to pick right now? And the same with Greenland. And the thing is, as crazy as that sounds to the average American in terms of Greenland, we as a country have tried to buy Greenland on a couple of different occasions. Seward, the guy that bought Alaska from the Russians, had tried to grab Greenland at one point, as I think the United States did in 1946, immediately after the World War II, approached Denmark about turning it over, which Denmark, of course, refused at the time. So it is something that we have tried in the past. So out of those two, as crazy as it sounds, Greenland is a little bit less surprising to me than maybe the Panama Canal. And if nothing else, well, we've tried to get it in the past, and then also its geopolitical importance up there, close to the top of the world, and just for control of the Arctic. If you can control the Arctic, you can get to places like Russia and China a heck of a lot quicker, if you catch my drift. And so there's going to be a big battle with that. So when I take a look at that, I'm going, that seems mighty weird. Now, what do you think about the Gulf of America comment?
You know, that out of the three that were all kind of spewed almost in one paragraph, that's to me, you know.
I think he's just being silly with that.
Yeah, and I just can't. I think it was John Fetterman who said it. Who said he's not even president yet. We can't start freaking out about every sentence.
Wait a second, you're not quoting John Fetterman?
Yeah, he's making a. But we can't start freaking out about everything that this guy says. But I want to say one last thing about the canal, and you know, we've talked for a while about geopolitics and China and the sphere of influence. I think that's the focus with the Panama Canal. Is not necessarily the Panamanians having control of it. It's that it seems like for a lot of people that the Chinese really have control over the Panama Canal.
If I'm not mistaken, maybe a firm based in Hong Kong.
Yeah,
a lot of technical advisors from Hong Kong.
Yeah, so there's a ton of Chinese exposure for the Panama Canal that not only has shipping for just goods through the Panama Canal, but there's a military impact from going from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
Well, it certainly would inhibit China's ability to get natural resources from South America, namely Brazil and Venezuela, in the case of a armed conflict with the United States.
Yeah, and it could slow down our effectiveness in getting things from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
Well, I mean, without doubt, that's the reason why they built it.
If that had to be a case, whether it was Taiwan or what have you. So again, we've seen a lot of change in the last, I would say, almost 2 weeks, to where it's like it really does feel like Trump is already president again.
Yes.
I mean,
the European leaders are already meeting with him, and Macron has gone out and said, "Hey, you have a great ally." Yeah, he doesn't talk like that, but I mean, you have a great ally in France and all that stuff. But I will tell you that, I think what Trump has been doing during this transition period is saying, "Hey, I've got 4 more years left. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do. I'm going to say whatever the hell I want to say." And people probably going, "He didn't do that the first time." Well, get a load. Things like. I think some of the stuff he's been saying in relation to Canada is really just kind of to gig Justin Trudeau. Yeah, Thoreau.
Henry.
Henry. It's just to gig him. I mean, from the comments over the years, I think Donald Trump loathes that man. and I think the feeling's mutual. But making comments sort of like Canada's 51st state, I'm not exactly sure.
Governor Trudeau.
Yeah, Governor Trudeau. I'm not sure what that's what the purpose of that is, except to make people angry.
Well, and we've seen it with his picks for cabinet and different positions. I mean, it's all kind of lines up with someone who is not only. I think he went. This may surprise people, but a little more traditional with some of the picks in his cabinet the first go around.
Yes.
Some people who had the experience that it's the classic Secretary of Defense. It's the classic. I mean, they have the background that you would expect for it. Where that has clearly not been the case, whether it's Kash Patel or Pete Hegseth or whoever you want to. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, who is not a doctor by any means, leading the Department of Health and Human Services. So he is like, it's kind of like the coach who eventually says, you know what, screw what the GM says. I want to have my guys, and if I'm going down with the ship, I'm going down with my choices.
Yeah.
And the comments, whether it's Greenland, the Panama Canal, Governor Trudeau, what have you, it's kind of like I'm tired of playing it kind of even slightly more down the middle, and he's more comfortable showing the content that he has for someone like Justin Trudeau.
Well, there you go. Now, what do you think about unelected people during this transition phase absolutely stealing the spotlight and doing things that I just nothing short of jaw-dropping in my estimation. First one being Zuckerberg. What do you think about Zuckerberg's most recent, it was almost an admission in some ways, but then saying, hey, we're not going to do the censorship any longer.
Well, it's a smart business move.
Yeah.
I mean, in kind of the same way, it was probably the smart business move for the last 4 years going the other way. And so, I think Zuckerberg gets a lot of grief, and probably a lot of it for good reason. But at the end of the day,
he's out to make a buck. No matter what he says, he's out to make a buck.
He's out to take care of Meta.
And by association, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yes, and I mean they're one and the same. I mean he's by far the largest shareholder and the founder of the company. I mean, and he's done a good job with a lot of things that people haven't really given him credit for. I think focusing and doubling down on AI at the right times. Yeah. I mean, cutting spending in certain areas that really the market really seemed to appreciate. And so I think you've seen a lot of it. You've seen Zuckerberg. You've seen all these other CEOs and chairmen. You've seen Bezos. You've seen Tim Cook all giving $1 million to the Trump inauguration fund. They're all bending the knee or kissing the ring, whichever terminology you want to use. But it's not this is what companies do. They go with the flow, and they want the support of who's in power. I mean, this is not
the last thing these guys want. And I would imagine some of these guys are pretty left of center. The last thing they want is to have Donald Trump coming after them.
Yes, and that's exactly.
So essentially, in a lot of ways, what you're kind of trying to say is they're trying to pay him off.
Kiss the ring.
Pay him off.
Bend the knee. Whatever you
pay him off.
Yeah, whatever term you want to use. But it's been that's not unique to Donald Trump. I mean that's been
you can make the argument that they've been that way for during the Biden administration, during the Obama administration.
I think it's hard to argue that they haven't done that, and maybe Zuckerberg says, okay, we did go a little too far with some of the stuff, and that's not the point. I'm not going to make that argument one way or another what he actually thinks. But this trend that companies we've talked about want to at least know what the next few years is going to look like, and they'll play by those rules. That's what we're seeing. The rules are changing.
Well, the rules are changing, and I think maybe why they didn't change as much during Trump's first term in office was his first election did not feel as much like a mandate as maybe this one did. He did not win the popular election, back in 2016. A lot closer on the electoral college. This go around, that's a pretty huge move that the ex-president-elect did in terms of the popular vote, and won the electoral college pretty convincingly. I mean, he won the swing states. Won all of them, swept all the states that people thought he was going to win, and made up some ground, believe it or not, in some of the other states where he wasn't supposed to win.
He made up ground in pretty much every single state. And so while, the House races, which are obviously every 2 years, weren't as much of a mandate for Republican policies.
Those are things, House races are a little bit more, it's almost like a local race.
Right. But we clearly saw, the Republicans have not typically won popular votes over the last couple decades.
Not over the last couple decades, no.
That trend has clearly gone the direction for the Democrats, and the Electoral College has really saved Republicans in several elections.
Yes.
So to have that go against, whether he barely won the popular vote or, he won it by a decent bit. It ended up slimming down when California eventually still counts all their votes.
The state that is the hub of our nation's technology sector.
I think still counting votes?
Yes, takes months to count their
He could be
votes.
Officially president before they've
That's
counted every vote.
craziness.
But nonetheless, there's clearly been at least a mandate in the sense that something that there's large headwinds to, which is Republicans winning the popular vote, happened pretty comfortably.
Well, there you go. Now, what about your boy Musk? What do you think about all the brouhaha that he's stirring up?
I think Trump is going to get tired of Musk pretty quickly,
Well,
and I think there's already rumors
two
that
personalities, two huge personalities in the same room.
Well, beyond that, I think Trump is not maybe already, but I think at some point isn't going to like the focus being so much on somebody else and the feeling that somebody else is more powerful or somebody else is actually making the decisions. He wants
that someone is wealthier than he is.
So you check a lot of these boxes, and I think the Elon. I think there's a lot of it that he truly believes. I think there's things that may not help his businesses, may actually hurt them, that he is pushing for, that he thinks are good for the country. So we'll see how all that turns out. But, we've seen Trump sour on people pretty regularly, to put it lightly, including his own vice president.
Yes.
So I just don't have a lot of confidence that this is, 4 years of this, we're going to...
But in the meantime, I know one of the things that Musk has really brought to light is all the rape situation cases over in the United Kingdom, which I didn't know terribly much about ahead of time. It seemed as though British press had largely swept that underneath the rug. If only half of that is true, if half of what Musk is saying and half of what I'm reading in various news sources is true, that's a pretty big black eye for Westminster.
It is, and we're seeing him get involved in lots of countries now.
Yes.
It's been a weird turn for somebody who I think was largely out of the political spectrum.
It seemed almost apolitical for years.
Yeah, and he's argued that he's been just left of center and that he didn't change, that the whole spectrum changed, and whether there's probably some truth to that, and I don't think he didn't move to the right, though. I think that's kind of hard to argue. But that's been an interesting thing. This is someone who could buy every professional American sports team and still have money left over. Every NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL team and still have money left over. I think the wealth that this man has it's really hard to grasp. It's hard to comprehend. He bought Twitter for $40 billion, and people thought that was terrible, and now he's still worth $450 billion now. It's really hard to wrap your head around, and this is something that I think people have soured on large billionaires getting into politics and controlling things. Soros has been the example for a long time. But it's funny, you see people on both sides liking the billionaires as long as they're helping their policies.
Well, the thing is, when you think about people like Musk, Musk can put all of his money in a savings account at a bank, earn 1% per year, and still earn over $1 billion a year in interest.
It's not bad.
That's craziness, isn't it? So when you take all of it together, everything that you're hearing with Zuckerberg, Musk, everything that the current administration is doing during this transition period, everything that the upcoming administration has said it wants to do, and just some of the crazy sort of almost Trumpisms out there, do you, as a member of, I guess you're millennial. Are you millennial or Z?
Depends on who
the
you
day.
ask, yeah.
All right. Do you think this is normal?
I think it's probably the new normal. And part of it's just the amount of, we've gotten to the point that executive orders are so normal
Yeah.
That, of course, if something's decreed by executive order, the next administration, if they don't believe it's going to just reverse it.
Yeah.
If these are not bills that have passed through Congress, passed through the House, passed through the Senate, and been signed by the president, I mean, if all we are doing is executive orders, and a large chunk of these on both sides are largely unconstitutional, I would argue. But that's the new norm, is to just executive order everything. So we are going to continue to get this, hey, we're banning something. Oh, hey, we're doubling down on it in the next administration, and this back and forth and back and forth. I just think it's the new normal, and I think it's largely due to a lack of pushback on the power of the presidency. And I think the amount of people that get so caught up on who the president is and have so much stress about it is an indicator that we have allowed the presidency to have too much power.
Well, I agree with you on that 100%. But I will tell you that, let's say, Trump just completely erases Biden's ban on the drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. Even so, if I'm the CEO of an energy company, of an E&P company, am I really going to go sink hundreds of millions or billions of dollars into exploration of the Gulf of Mexico when I realize that, hey, in another 4 years, they might say I can't do it anymore?
Yeah.
So effectively, what Biden has done, no matter what Trump does, is made it very unattractive. To drill for oil and new oil rigs in the Gulf of America, just due to the fact that there you go, just due to the fact that you're just really subjecting your company to the political whims in Washington at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're making anything off any incredibly large investments, which these new rigs and E&P would be, off of 4-year time horizons, I mean, most of them, by the time you spend the money and it's built, is going to be the next time an election's coming through.
Yes.
So that's hard to do. I mean, yes, maybe current rigs, you go pedal to the metal on those, but these large investments, just the fact that we go off 2 and 4 year cycles makes it harder when you're talking about capital intensive things.
One last question before we bid adieu to this week's topic. As we all know, the wildfires are ravaging Los Angeles County and the city itself. Horrible, absolutely horrible. There's no getting around that. Some of our coworkers have had personal experience with families who have lost property and what have you out there. So it's just hard to comprehend. I mean, really, living here. Have you been surprised by maybe some of the pushback that the elected officials have been getting in California regarding either their lack of attention to wildfires themselves or the lack of preparation?
Yeah, I'm curious. There's early reports that this is the most expensive wildfire in the history of the U.S., and that's pretty easy to believe considering where
it is. Yeah.
And
to the best of my knowledge, it's still not really contained.
No, and I'm wondering if this is kind of opens an Overton window or something where it changes the political spectrum in a lot of these areas. And Mayor Bass was over in Ghana. She was.
I'm still not clear why the mayor of Los Angeles needs to be in Ghana.
And she was on the short list for Joe Biden's vice president 4 years ago, and the budget for the fire department was cut recently, and then there was
$17 million. And
then there was California state legislator banned these insurance companies from raising fire premiums. So what happens when you do that? If you're going to cancel them, if there's a high risk that this is going to happen and you can't get a market rate for it. So we've seen all this happen, and we've seen, strips of Malibu, these picturesque homes burnt, gone. And nothing really feeling like it's being done, probably for a lot of people. And I wonder if this changes things, at least for areas of Los Angeles and Southern California.
Well, and I wonder as well, because I think not because I think, but because I have read a number of people complaining that Californians complaining that, hey, we pay the highest level of taxes anywhere in the country, and our fire hydrants don't have any pressure. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And so I'm just wondering whether or not there's going to be a sea change against sort of government involvement in everything, which it seems as though Sacramento likes to do out there, and just having these less than let's call it less than optimal results from a lot of things. Now, obviously, government can't control whether or not something catches fire. And
well, they can a little bit. They can cut the underbrush and things like that.
You didn't let me finish. You're just like
giving them too much credit.
My goodness, you sound like my dad. You're like my father there. They don't start the fire. They don't start the winds. However, everything that you're saying, clearing out the underbrush, clearing out that kindling when it gets dry, making sure that water doesn't run off through the Los Angeles River out to the Pacific and goes into underground cisterns somewhere. I mean, all that type of stuff is something that government could, would, or should have done, and they didn't do so to any great effect. Would it stop the wildfires from starting? No. However, would it keep them from being as awful as they currently are? And I would say yes. And so I do think you will start to see greater pushback in California as a result of this, just due to how much their government really seems to have failed them in so many different ways, despite the amount of money that they spend in taxes. However, it's one of those deals. Everything that comes out of California can be a little head scratching at times, but this might be one of those ones where, it might be the straw that broke the camel's back. And some of the things I've read from certain celebrities, and not all of them James Wood, far right, but other people on the other side of the spectrum, they were sitting there saying, enough is enough. Come on, guys, what's going on? So if nothing else, I do feel as though this transition period, which we have talked about a lot, does have a feeling that we might be on, I don't know, the precipice of change in this regard, where, maybe the cancel culture will maybe dissipate a little bit, where perhaps people are a little bit more willing to shout out the truth or something along those lines without fear of being canceled, and frankly push back on people that have been telling them stories for a long period of time and haven't been delivering any sort of results. It might not always go in my favor, and likely won't. However, I'd much rather live in that sort of culture where people can be open and honest and disagree, but disagree with good intentions, as opposed to what we've really seen largely for the last, I'd say, 16 years, if not a little bit longer than that, where we are prone to cancel people out, shout them down, keep them from being heard just because they disagree with us. So any sort of change in that regard is good. In this transition period, as crazy as it's been and as weird as it's been, and how I don't agree with all of it, it does give me a little bit of cause for hope that perhaps some of the worst of that sort of cancel culture is over.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I hope you feel that same way too. Well, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you. Also, if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always reach us at oakworth.com or send us an email at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com. That's a better way of putting that.
It is a better way.
There you have it. Or you can leave us a review on the podcast. I'm going to try that again. Or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. So there you go. Also, if you're interested in reading more, hearing more of what we got to say or how we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, oakworth.com. Take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab and find links to all kinds of exciting information, including previous Trading Perspectives episodes, links to our weekly newsletter, Common Sense, as well as our upcoming quarterly analysis called Macro and Market. And Sam, I'm going to be quiet now, because if I stutter or screw up one more time, I don't know what's going to happen.
That's
so
all I got.
Do you have anything else today?
That's it.
All right. That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.